Hello, hello. Welcome to the running portal. I know it's been a little bit since we've done an episode, but this one's worth waiting for, I promise. So, this is a topic that's near and dear to me on a couple of different levels because I've experienced it personally myself. I've had an athlete go through it, and inevitably, if you've been on Instagram, Facebook, maybe even somebody in your running circle, you've heard them talk about where they just feel burnt out. There's just a lot of fatigue, mental, not the physical, where they don't know where to go from here. The running doesn't feel like it used to, the racing doesn't feel like it used to. Sometimes it stems from a race that didn't go as planned. Maybe they weren't able to finish it, or the training to get to that race took so long that by the time they finished it, they were just kind of left empty. And then they weren't sure to go through, where do they go from there? So we're going to do this a little bit different. If you're not new to the portal, then um, you know that generally these are one-to-one, but again, because of what these topics are, I wanted to do this as a panel discussion. I have two fantastic ladies with me. And so grab something to drink, grab some snacks, everybody listen in. I really think that this is going to be something that whether you're a trail runner or not, that you can walk away from this and have some tools in your tool bag to figure out how to combat these when you run into that runner's fatigue or that just complete burnout. Karina and Brandy, thank y'all so much for joining us. I'm super excited. Karina, can you give us a little bit about who and what it is that you do and what state? Oh, fun fact, guys, we are doing this with three different time zones. So this is going to be super fun. We got three different people with three different states involved here. So this is going to be fun. Go for it, Karina.
All right, thanks, Monica. I'm really happy to be here today, by the way, and
Thank
grateful
you.
Brandy can make it as well. My name's Karina Ray. I'm in Washington State, so up in the upper left. I'm actually always like been running since I was 12, so 39 years running. It's a
Wow.
favorite part of my life. I've been a therapist for 25 years. And I just recently left a job where I was launched a shoe brand in the United States, is Mount to Coast, a wonderful ultra running brand. And I'm very big fan of this topic as a therapist and as a lifetime runner. So just really happy to be here discussing this today. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you so much. Miss Brandy?
Yes, so I am actually in Florida. I have lived here for 26 years now. I did not grow up as a runner. I did not start running until about 13 years ago and consistently for the last four. I am a massage therapist by trade. I am celebrating my 8th year as a massage therapist, and I am also a photographer. My husband and I own a production company together. So that is something that keeps me on the trails as well as running now. So thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here. This subject is just, it's everything to me, just why we do what we do and why we're out here on the trails together.
I think that's great. And a fun fact is for those listening, and I really encourage you to go check out what Bigger Than the Trail is. I am a current ambassador for them. Karina has been an ambassador for them. Brandy is one. Um, what they stand for, what it is that they do for mental health and advocacy and getting resources into people's hands. It really is amazing. But I love the culture and the community because you don't feel like you're by yourself. And that was their biggest driving point for creating that was so people could recognize they're not by themselves. There's resources and there's help. So go check out Bigger Than the Trail and see what they're all about and see how you can help. So, all right, let's just dive like right into this. So I think from um a coach's perspective, this is a very real topic when I have athletes that come to me, is that if they're experienced, if they've kind of been racing for a couple of years, they kind of reach, well, like Brandy and I were talking about. was posted 2 days ago by another male runner. His words were, um, I am so burnt out from running, but I'm so hardwired to train that I just go and do, but I feel nothing and I hate it. And that's a very real feeling. I've had some athletes come to me where they're like, I just don't feel it anymore. I have a hard time being motivated. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I need someone to make me go and do what I'm supposed to do. But I'm burnt out. My body is tired. My mind is tired. Um, and so I know, like, the very first thing we do is we always acknowledge it. How did we get here? Because I think just like with an injury, the injury just didn't happen. If you go backwards, look at some notes, look at a race or something, you're going to see, that's where that injury really happened. Um, and I think it's that same way with the burnout, that runner's fatigue, where you're just somewhere's the joy stopped. And so that's really what this whole topic is going to be about today, is not just on the runner's fatigue, but the additional pressures it brings when you are a coach, when you're a therapist, when you're an ambassador for a company, when you're an athlete for a company. And those are two different things. And if you're new to running, let me just explain that real quick. So an ambassador is, you represent a company by wearing their products, their t-shirt, and you shout it out to social media or at the races. An athlete is that's like a whole nother different level, where you're like the face of the company. You're an employee, so not only are you repping their brand, but you're out racing underneath their umbrella, so that's another pressure. And then as a coach, like I am, it can be hard to acknowledge when you've hit that fatigue, because you don't want to come across as weak or or inadequate, because what runner wants to hire a burnt out, fatigued, injured coach, right? Or like with Karina, it's the same thing. So that same thought line can kind of be spread around the circle. And so um it is a heavy topic, but I think it's a much needed topic, because ultra runners, we do it because we want to push the boundaries, right? We don't do it because of t-shirts and bling and medals, and buckles are really cool. There are some really cool buckles out there. I've looked at some of them myself and I'm like, man, I would like to do that race just so I can have the buckle. Not going to lie.
Mhm.
Uh, but there's so much that goes into it. So Karina, I want to give the floor to you on this topic about what's a good way for a runner to acknowledge when, like, before they hit that fatigue button. Is there some signs that maybe they could watch for? Or if you flip the coin, what are maybe some preventative ways so that you stay healthy and happy and you're out there enjoying what you're paying to do?
Great questions, Monica. And for the listeners, like I just want to say, I've been there myself. And it is such almost a shameful space. And Monica, you alluded to this when talking from a coach's perspective, how you feel like, I don't want anyone to know because I'm the coach. So we can get burned out from all aspects as a coach, as a runner, as an ambassador, in any of those capacities. And I think what it comes down to for proactivity is being aware of what our own where we are at any space and time with running, so keeping an eye on what is happening with the relationship with ourself and running, and looking for those warning signs, like just like with a job, um, which I know about recently. What's happening with our morale, and is it harder to get out the door? What are our own personal warning signs? And I know we might not become aware of these until we've been through it once, but just like with anything else in life, keeping an eye on our own reactions every day, and whether we're excited still. Do we hop out of bed to do it? Are we putting it off half an hour? Because at the end point, it's dread. And then we become even resentful with ourselves, and that, depression starts, can creep in. So there's just so many sides to it. But I think for proactivity, it can be really helpful to have a short list of what your own warning signs are. So when I'm working with clients around mental health, and some of my clients are runners, we have a short list and like an inventory that they can check, because it's with running, it's so automatic that we just do our activity that we can get unplugged pretty easily,
Yes,
so we become numb to it. And certainly this leads to us getting injured physically, right? But
exactly.
it can also lead to getting injured mentally and emotionally. So me personally, when I start to have, my biggest indicator light is when I'm having to drag myself to do it, and I'm not thinking at the end of a run about what my goals are, during it about what my goals are. Instead, I'm thinking, when is this done? When can this just be over? And that's my biggest indicator. So the relationship is changing with it. And this extrapolates to so many things. Of course, we've all been in relationships as well. So, when it's not doing it for you anymore, but you still are in love with the person. So it's it's pretty complex. I liken it to relationships. Certainly physical injury can be an indicator that happens, that show that we're like running outside of ourselves, or not staying within ourselves. That's my personal running mantra, by the way. Stay within yourself. When
Love
you're
that. Love it.
connected right to yourself. A coach that gave that to me, because I'm a squirrel and I tend to pop out of myself, and I don't just do it in running. So staying right with yourself. The other one I use is going only as fast as your slowest part, because that's the part that needs the most attention. And if I'm doing those two things, then I'm most likely I'm right in the present, in the moment. Because of course, running, we can be running to something or from something. The healthiest running is when we're enjoying it right in the moment. So I just keep a short list with clients and try. And of course, I'm the worst with myself, because we can't see 360 on
Oh
ourselves.
yes, yes. And I love the perspective. I love the idea of the list and like that check-in so that it does help you to pause. I think it's super critical and important that especially trail and ultra runners have at least like a month, a good solid 30 days where they are completely unplugged from training. Courtney DeWalter is great with this. When she's not training, she's got videos, she's hiking, she's on a bike, she's out there having fun. And I think that's so critical that for like at a minimum 30 days, and I know some runners listening to this are probably going, I can't do it for the try it. Just go do something different, do something fun. It doesn't mean that you stop physical activity. You're just unplugging the brain from that grind of the training, and you're just allowing yourself to have fun and to remember, okay, this is not all work. We're going to do some different things. We're going to have some fun with it. So Brandy, I have a question for you, especially with you as a massage therapist, because when I think of massage, I think like zen and kind of like bring yourself back to center. um and I love because Karina touched on this, or Karina and I both have touched on this. So, like, I mean, if somebody is, if they've reached that stage where they're burnt out and they're trying to figure out how to, how to step back into running. And I know you shared with me, I love what you're doing. You're going for attempt number two on your 100 miler, which is freaking awesome. But
Woo.
I think sometimes like failure at a first attempt, somebody might be going, I'm done. Or I've seen two things. They jump right back into it immediately and they fail again because they didn't learn from the first time. Or it is such a struggle the second time that when they finish that one, they're like, I don't ever want to do this again. I don't want to do this again because this was no fun. So what would be your suggestion to kind of help like offset that. If somebody is like, their first experience wasn't good, it wasn't what they thought, how can they step back into this in a good, healthy way? What's a good, fun way? Because I like some of what you do in your approach. So what would you suggest to that runner that might find themselves in that boat?
So, first of all, I love this question because for me, I can relate completely. I feel like the comeback is almost better than the first attempt anyway. So I try to relate with my clients as much as I can, personal experience, but I do have a broad spectrum of athletes that I treat, runners being a heavy, percentage of the athletes that I work on. And what I try to remind myself and them is that in those so-called failures is where the deepest lessons happen. It's what can we look at from that point five view and say, maybe it wasn't even nutrition, maybe it was the narrative I was speaking to myself during that experience. Maybe we can sit down and do like we've spoken about an inventory and not from a shame body, but from a
Right.
place of an outward, like a observer of the experience and say, let me take a look at really what was happening because we can get caught up, oh, well, I had, blisters or I didn't do this. And that shame starts to build so heavy. And I think that shame is what keeps us from going back for that next attempt, where I feel like if you take that bystander approach to yourself and your experience, you can really have compassion, not just for yourself, but show the same compassion to yourself you would show somebody else that you want to walk through that experience and say, hey, what actually happened out there? What was going on here? And then I utilize that in my practice now. They are on the table, so they're a little bit more susceptible to listening to me because that power differential. They're like, oh God, but at the same token, it's that comeback is so much like stronger. I failed my first 50-mile attempt, and what a beautiful experience that was because I learned so much. And when I crossed that finish line for the first 50-mile finish, I was like, okay. Okay, I do like a comeback.
Yeah, I love that. I love that perspective because in ultras, it's not it's not it's the I think it's the rare runner that doesn't ever have a DNF on their calendar. I think it's more of there's going to be that one race or that one that's just a little out of your reach, and you know that, but you're like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to toe the line because I want to see how far can I get. And I think for those runners, their mental is already where it needs to be at because they're recognizing on a couple of different levels, a little outside of my reach, but I've done the training. I might just surprise myself and finish this thing. Or I might not, but I'm okay with that because I know what I'm stepping into. Here's a question for both of you, and Karina, I'm going to let you answer first. So, um, in talking about in when we've kind of spoken with it general, Karina, you touched on a little bit. So let's make it really specific. What happens when you're an ambassador or an athlete for company and you're just like, I can't do this anymore. But the pressure to show up on social media and to do the plugs and be the cheerleader for the company, it's like, how do you make yourself do that? And is it even healthy for you to do that, or does that just really start building the walls of I'm not feeling this? And is it better to reach out to the company and just be truthful with them and say, hey, look, this is where I'm at with my running relationship, and I need to pull back. I need to step back. I'm gonna let you answer that one first, Karina.
Okay, thanks, Monica. Again, I know this from a professional and a personal perspective. because I was with a large shoe brand as an ambassador when I had a personal trauma happen. And I wish I had just uh, communicated much better than I did. I would say communicate, 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 because from the athlete side, again, and I know this word keeps coming up, and I'm glad it is. I'm glad that Brandy said it. Shame, so much shame comes up that it's just heavy, that it makes it even harder to work through whatever you're working through with your running or your life to get back to being the best ambassador you can be and feel good about your relationship doing that. But I also just built an ambassador program for a company, and I had to write the contract for the athletes. And as I was doing that, I thought about my experience. And when I brought on ambassadors, I told them, communicate as much as you want. You don't have to share personal info, but the more we know about what's happening,
Yes.
the better this will go. Now, there are, obligations that are conditional,
Right.
and it is somewhat transactional. So that's just reality, the business side of it. But a lot of companies, they do want to know. Also, the ambassador group, the team can support the runner as well. So I would just say communicate, 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 be brave, have some of those conversations. If there's anyone on the ambassador team that you're with that you're comfortable talking to, talk to them. It is hard to do. Certainly the pressure is what it is. It might be my pressure was more internal about wanting to be a really good ambassador. I'm a recovering perfectionist, so that was difficult. A lot of runners were type A people, so as much as you can, be gentle with yourself and then communicate as much as possible. That's what I would say. I kept some ambassadorships. I lost some. That's a whole learning experience to itself too, but it all works out in the end. And as long as you, keep feeling good about yourself, I think that's what matters. And there'll be more ambassadorships in the future.
I love that approach because I know like last year what I had or not last year but this year because most ambassadorships in somewhere's in the spring, April, May, some are June, but most in April or May. Um and I just reached out to him. I was like, I'm not, I'm like just had surgery. I'm not out there like hardly at all right now. But at some point I will be able to get back to them. And I had immense support from them. Momentous is I'm listed as a competitor with them. I just was honest with them and they were like, take care of yourself first. And then just start tagging us where you can and doing what you need to. And I love that. The other team, Mind Matter, the same thing. And so I think that's really critical is that communication. Um and I think when you can acknowledge it to yourself, then it's easier to acknowledge it to whom you have that obligation to. Um most should hopefully be receptive. Some might not be. And then, like you said, there are other ambassadorships out there. So, um, Brandy, like what would be your approach with this? If you had a friend that came and said, "Man, look, I don't know what to do. I've been with this company and
So for
I don't know."
me, I want to say, this is something I've had to learn personally, especially I recently dealt with compassion fatigue. And that is a whole other animal when you are representing companies as an ambassador. I'm lined up with Rad Rabbit, Bigger Than the Trail. I just got Alter Ego, which I think is amazing because they prefaced it. Involve yourself as much as you want or as little as you want. You get out what you put in. Bigger Than the Trail, we've touched on them, but I couldn't imagine representing a better company or not company, nonprofit, because when I was dealing with the compassion fatigue, they just wrapped their arms around me.
Mhm.
And I want to say that your your biggest and greatest investment is yourself. So if you have to step aside and communicate that, sometimes that's hard, especially experiencing trauma. Sometimes we don't know how to communicate that in that moment, especially if you're in that survival state. And with that being said, once that kind of can settle, I do find that involving myself in community, because healing isn't, in my opinion, and what I've seen in my practice, isn't done alone. You know, there is this societal push for the grind and keep going and work harder, nobody cares kind of
David Goggins.
mentality. Yeah, and I think we can utilize those processes in doses.
Right.
However, what I see in the endurance community and endurance athletes is that we thrive as a tribe and we heal as a tribe, and we should lean on that tribe if we feel that we can, but to also give ourselves grace if we can't. And if you're representing brands or companies, obviously communicate, but I'm going to talk about that shame body again, because if you can't find that way to articulate where you are in that moment, I do encourage therapy, of course. I
Yeah.
think that therapy will never, or running or whatever your sport is, will never replace therapy. However, it is therapeutic, and community is as well.
And I'm so glad that you said that because I actually heard on another podcast, and I think Karina, you will agree with this, is that therapy definitely has its place, and you shouldn't be putting things in place of therapy if you feel that's what you need. And you shouldn't feel ashamed or less of if therapy is what you need. There's all types of therapy out there. There's therapists specific to athletes. There's, just whatever gamut that you might find on. So I'm really glad that you said that, Brandy, because I think that's critical. I mean, we joke and you see it in posts and stuff, oh, running is my therapy, and we say it so off the cuff and so lighthearted. But on a making it just a little bit more serious. If you feel that you need that, then definitely reach out to somebody that you can have some one-to-one time. And there's definitely time to have like the David Goggins, mentality, suck it up, move it on.
Yes.
But some of his stuff, it's super, super intense. I was once told they were from a CrossFit buddy of mine. He was like, y'all been drinking way too much of David Goggins. He's like, y'all are gonna have to dial it down a little. And but if I would encourage people to like listen to some of David Goggins' interviews, because even though he's like this super hype guy, he also brings it down and keeps it very real
Mhm.
about like the mental part of like who and what he is. And that's why it's so important for me to get these topics out there, because trails are beautiful and the trail community, it is close knit. And you do I know my first ultra, I was like, I have found my people. These people are suffering. They are bringing me along with them. Um, I know that anybody that's ever done their first ultra, especially because it was habanero. I finished the first loop and I was like, everything I thought I trained for was right. No, it's wrong. It's so wrong. Dumped it in the trash can, went back out, and I was like, all right, we're gonna try this again. But this leads me to the next question. And Karina, I'm gonna let you like answer this one. So most ultra plans are generally about 4 to 5 months in length. Some of them are longer. I feel like the 200 plus in races out there have now become like the new 100s. I am sure that those events probably take a little bit longer in training, and the training concept is like completely different because you've got so much required gear, so you've got to train with that pack on, and it's a whole different, it's like its own little video game. It's these different levels. And so when I think about somebody being in that type of training, from like 5 to 7 to 8 months, and of course we all know the golden rule, Try to find some races that lead into it so you can work out any kinks or anything. So you have that where it's not racing, but you are. Or let me change this. I'm gonna give y'all this. This is from Andrea Moore. I interviewed her. She's a phenomenal athlete. She's a phenomenal person. She doesn't call them racing, she calls them run events. That has so stuck with me, and I love that. So that's a freebie from Andrea Moore. It's fantastic. So in this running event, um, think about that time. It take any depending on you, 5 to, say, 7 months of training and these run events that you're going to do going into it. And then you're in the event. And let's use Cocodona as an example. Everybody knows that one. It's 250 miles. It's point to point. It's out in the Arizona desert. This year, the weather was freaking epic. It was nothing of what people thought, but it was such a firm reminder of why there's that mandatory gear between the rain and the snow and just everything. What happens when an athlete makes it to their A race and it doesn't quite go as they thought, but they finish? And they're proud that they finish, but they walk away from it just done. Like they have no idea where to start again, if they want to start again. Um, and let me give you one more part of this too, Karina. What happens when they that race becomes such an immense suffer fest to finish? Because we all know you get in that race where it is such a grind and there's just a battle of wills in the head. You're like, I'm going to finish this, and you do, but then the outcome is the same. You are so mentally like drained from the suffer fest of it. So what are some tools, like how can somebody step back into it? Or is it maybe time for them to pull back just a little bit and just unplug from social media, unplugged from the run community for a little bit? And then if they unplug, how can they step back into it and not feel guilty or ashamed? I know that's kind of a couple of different questions in there, but they all kind of interlace with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Great questions. It makes me think about mountaineering. I also mountaineer. And I remember the first time I didn't summit, and I had summited everything I tried up until then. And only if I summited was I going to be successful. But coming back that day, I had my mountaineering buddies telling me about how making it back alive is winning and
Wow.
learning is winning. So now I use that in ultras as well. I think about um, what am I learning? And the second thing that I think about and that I want people to think about is what are the returns from if they suffer through it? Are there diminishing returns? If they're diminishing as one goes along in the race, then is it worth it to get through that sufferfest? I know, certainly you mentioned Goggins, and so suffering is something that we talk a lot about and that we give a lot of merit to in ultra running.
Yeah.
But me personally, in my lifetime of running, I've learned more each year about how suffering isn't how there's an unhealthy side to that. And there's the fun, exciting side to it. But for ultra racing, um, it's something we all have to question whether, the returns are worth it. And then if we do suffer through that race that maybe didn't go as we wanted, but it was our A race, we trained 8 months for it. There's no harm at all in taking that 30 days or 2 weeks afterwards to let the dust settle, let the body, start to recover and not, and eat all the food the entire time and to,
Yes.
right, really,
Yes.
really take care of oneself without any pressure at all to run. And then when it's time to run, or there's a little bit of a feeling like I should or I want to, my test is that piece I mentioned earlier, only going as fast as your slowest part. and then not wearing the watches, not having Strava on, not not recording any data, just going out and running for the love of running or seeing what it tastes like again.
I love
And
that.
not majoring at all, because we really get caught up on that too, especially in training for those, at 6 months or 8 months, for certainly for the longer events like the 200s, the 240s, like and hundreds, we're thinking about data all the stinking time. So just to truly unplug, I know it's really hard to do. Or something could substitute, like doing mindfulness yoga, different types of yoga, getting that suite of activities going, massage and yoga, breathing, um, staying right in the present, and then letting running bring you back to it because it seems fun again. Um, but I know that's there's a lot more to it. But for me, I really want people to be as kind as possible to themselves. It's not easy to do, especially when we get caught up in thinking that we're winning the more we're suffering.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's the balance that ultra runners have, right? Because that's what ultra running is. You are pushing the body physically and mentally to see what it's capable of. How much more can you go? If you've done a handful of hundreds and now this is your first 200, it's kind of the same concept. But I think, as you mentioned, there is kind of that balance that needs to be held if you find yourself just in a hard, grind where, it's not so much the mental pet. I guess let me clarify this for people listening. When I say suffer fest, generally you've got blisters going on, something has happened with your hydration, you've got gut issues going on. There's like a multitude of things that are happening. It's not just the mind that's like, we hate you and we're done, and we're now in survival mode. It's all the things that can start happening in an ultra that just start piling on. So should have clarified that for listeners, but that's what a sufferfest, when we say sufferfest in trail running, that's what we're talking about. But Brandy, let me pass that same kind of question statement to you, especially with, like, what you do. What is a good way to kind of approach the healing part of this?
So I'm glad you asked, because I feel like most of the runners that I work with, and even myself, we tend to avoid some of that recovery, some of that self-compassion. It's more about the grind. I'm going to go out, I'm going to run, I'm going to train, I'm going to race. And then what? Incorporating mobility or cross training, anything that feeds the other parts of yourself. I think being able to fine tune and balance and dial in, where am I adding too many stressors into my life, into my training, into the expectations I set for myself. I look at this and I think about, like, my training and what I try to incorporate, and I'll do sauna, cold plunge. And sometimes I'm piling too much on. I'm running, I'm a mom, I'm running businesses, this, that, and the other. And I have to mitigate some of that cortisol. I can't just ask without pouring back in, because at some point that cup is going to be completely depleted.
Yeah.
So I try to remind not just myself, but translating that to my athletes is, okay, well, what are you doing for you? And I trained, I stretched, I foam rolled. I'm like, I get that. But what did you do for you? You know, did you read a book? What else do you like to? I mean, it could be painting, it could be going for a walk, taking your dogs out, snuggling up and watching a movie with your kids. It's finding a balance, which I think is that ever elusive chase, much
I don't
like a
think
finish
any of
line.
us, yeah, I don't think any of us balance well, especially I think, like, you get to kind of like the middle part of that training and your brain's just like, oh my gosh, you're there's the part of your brain goes, okay, we're halfway, this is cool. And
Mhm.
then you go, but then you look at the calendar and your brain's like, we got 2 more months of this. And then
Mhm.
I'm so glad that you brought up real life, right? The real life, the kids and the job that are behind the running, like here, at my house. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I have a special needs adult son that still lives with us. I'm running 2 businesses. Um, my athletes, they have busy lives. They're moms, or I have one, she's got to hit a certain goal to be able to qualify for this job that she applied for. So she's like on a completely different like level. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think that's also a piece, and I've heard this from other individuals that have been interviewed in different podcasts, that they feel that guilt sometimes for being out there on the trails
Mhm.
for all the training and all the time that it takes, because they're not at home. They're not helping with the kids, or they told, the husband sees them go out the door and they're like, well, I guess I'm gonna do something on my own till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Um, and some runners don't have that support.
Right.
And so
Right.
then the guilt is extra. And I think that compounds when they don't do well at a race, or
Mhm.
they end up DNFing. And so I think it kind of compounds into that runner's fatigue. I don't think that runner's fatigue, burnout, I don't think that it's an instant thing. I think it's a series of events from personal and the runner part that end up melding together, where you just kind of like, I don't know. And I know, like, for moms, I've heard it from moms, they feel immense guilt. They love running. Running is kind of
Mhm.
like their
Hmm.
deal, but then they feel so guilty because they're not, or some stop. They don't
Mhm.
run because they're like, I need to be home with kids. I don't want to miss out on their life.
Yep.
Um, and so that's why, this topic to me is so important, because it's not just, I know we are 3 women here, but it's not just women. It's also
Mhm.
men that go through this. Um, and I'm curious, because I don't know if y'all see it in your areas, but here in Texas, so I'll talk to Texas, we are seeing younger and younger um, individuals come out to the trail races, going for the big distance, not a 50K. They are going for the 100 mile,
Hmm.
which
Yep.
I think it's awesome. I love seeing the younger generation out to the trails. But in getting ready for this conversation with y'all, it makes me wonder, what's the longevity of these runners when they are starting at 18, 19, 20? And
Hmm.
then, you put on the medical hat. People hear aging athlete and they think physical age, but aging athlete is really when they start running. Interesting concept, I know. But they kind of have this peak of when they're going to be their most successful, and then it's kind of a decline. And so again, it's the same questions that we've been asking today. What happens to someone like that they start at 20, and then at 25 they just wake up one day and they're like, I'm done. I'm
Hmm.
done.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yep.
it's it's a it's interesting. But in in wrapping this up, and I can't thank you ladies enough. This has been so good, just to slow down and get these types of topics and thoughts and answers out there in the universe, so that, especially if you're listening to this, you're not alone. You're not the first person that is like, I don't know if I want to run anymore. I don't know how to get back into it. There's I won't mention this person's name. There's a person that I follow on Instagram, um that has some issues that person's dealing with, and I know that it was very hard for that individual to come back on, uh but he was forthright with what he was and where he was at. um the comment section was so beautiful. the support that he had was so beautiful. And Brandy, it ties back into what you said about how the trail community is as a whole. It doesn't matter where you are in this universe. There is something that is so special about the trail community. And then Karina, it goes back to what you said earlier about just, owning where you are and with your running relationship. And this individual was an ambassador for one or two companies, I think. And I can't imagine if he had a conversation with them or not, but um, it just was so wonderful to see the support. And so I know, like, from a coach's perspective, like my closing thoughts on this, and then Karina and Brandy, I'm going to pass this to y'all from, I'm going to give it to y'all from two perspectives. From a coach's perspective, um, most coaches will tell you we're not here just to coach training plans. We're also here for the mental part of it. And so it's great when we have people like Karina that, we can go to, or we can give our athlete, your information and say, hey, because that's part of what our job is. We're not there just for the physical. We're also there for the mental, because the runner needs both, on that, especially when they get to the big A race. And then personally, we've all stated, we all have walked this road where, we didn't have a race go like we wanted, where we have felt less than, especially, I know for me, I am a perfectionist. I am 50. That is not going to change. I've given up. I thought I was going to. I hit menopause, and I think it just made it worse. We like leveled up, and I was
Yes.
like, oh
Yeah.
God. So,
And
I've just to learn to give myself more grace. And it sounds so crazy, but I'm so thankful for the surgery I had back in February, because it forced me to re-engage differently. And so that would be, these are my suggestions. Try volunteering. Go and sign up for the small distance. I'm talking like the 5K, and talk with people and take the photos, or do the 10K and take the photos and talk with people. And it's so fun, and it's so freeing of the mind, to re-embrace running in that aspect. And that's what I've done this entire year. It hasn't been easy, has not been all unicorns and sunshine. But it has definitely allowed me to keep the mental space in a good place, so that I don't find myself where I'm peace out, done. So those are my thoughts. Karina, what are your closing thoughts for somebody that's listening to this that finds themselves in this boat? What could they do? What would you suggest?
You just took some of the words out of my head there, Monica, with the last part that you said, because there's so many different areas of running. I highly suggest volunteering, crewing, um, designing a race, whatever, just, keeping a toe in while one is is figuring out, like, what am I going to do about my own burnout? Or is this burnout? When that's getting evaluated, you can still stay connected to running in a number of ways. But then I also want to leave listeners with this idea, that's kind of challenging. It's challenging for me personally as a perfectionist and a once pretty competitive runner, that we're human beings. Like, we're not human doings. We're
Yes,
not that right? That
love it.
doesn't define us. It sounds pretty cheesy to say, but we're human beings. Like, go be, do
Yes.
some gardening, set some new goals that aren't in the running realm at all. Challenge yourself that way. There's just so much to life. So open that lens and remember that you're beingness, and set some goals around that.
Love it.
Running will always be there, right,
Yes.
ladies? Running will always be there.
That's good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Randy, what would you leave our listeners with today?
Wow, that was beautiful. And I'll say run your own race. And there is no finish line because truly, we're never really done here. Running will always be there, but sometimes we just have to give ourselves the same grace that we are shown by others, that we want to show others, be that person to ourselves, show that compassion and kindness. And remember, sometimes the comeback tastes just as sweet, if not sweeter. I really truly believe that this community is here to uplift and support no matter what level or step of the journey you're on, and to know that we're never truly done, that there's always going to be a new lesson to be had, no matter how many setbacks, it's how many times you get up again.
I love that. I love that. This y'all's closing thoughts are absolutely spot on, absolutely beautiful. This has been so fantastic to do today. I really appreciate both of y'all slowing down a little bit and coming on and talking so that our listeners can hopefully walk away with some tools to add to their running bag. Or if they find themselves in this position, hopefully they can take some nuggets and use them and find ways to re-engage back in with the run community. And maybe it's not running for a while. Maybe it is volunteering or helping out. It's the beautiful thing about trails and ultras. For as long as I've been doing this, I still keep finding new and different races that are out there, and that is probably one of the most beautiful thing about trails is that it is a vast and big and wide world, and there are many different ways to engage it and still feel like you are part of the community. So ladies, thank you again so much for coming on. I truly appreciate y'all's time and y'all's words of wisdom and guidance. I truly appreciate it. Thank y'all so much.
Welcome. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.